because I'm doing some slightly different things behind here in terms of technically speaking. So I'm setting that all up. So hopefully you're well. I wanted to come and talk a little bit about ancient Kemet and talk a little bit about just the 12th dynasty and to kind of jump into that because I've had a chance to talk a little bit more about them and to jump out about them, and I get the question sometimes, when was the 12th dynasty? When are some of these things that we talk about in history, and how can we put them in a timeline? So I wanted to kind of just streamline that process right here and talk a little bit about that today, because when you think about the 12th dynasty was in the Middle Kingdom. It was in the Middle Kingdom, and it actually took place from around 1981 BC to about 1802 BC. So when you think about that, you're thinking right around 2000 or so BC, 2000 years before Christ is when you have the Middle Kingdom kicking in, and just like 2030 BC, if you will, is when the 11th dynasty comes into being, and then around 1981 you start to have the 12th dynasty comes into being, 1981 BC. And so that becomes a significant thing in ancient Kemetic history, man. And I'd love to hear what you think and some of your things down below, some of the things that comments you may have. But I'd love to hear what you think, because there's so much that goes into ancient Kemet. And when we think about the very important dynasties there were very important dynasties in ancient Kemet. It wasn't just the 12 dynasties. There were many dynasties that were important. You have the first dynasties that are in the first and second dynasties right in 3100 BC. So you're going all the way up into 1981 BC. You're going over 1,000 years till you get to the 12th dynasty. There's so many things that happen in a period of time. But one of the things that happens in the 12th dynasty is the 12th dynasty just starts to have more of an interaction from a documented standpoint with respect to Kush. And if you are someone who's had the question about where is ancient Kush, or how do we know about Kush, or what are some things we know, and why do we know the name Kush? Well, it starts to happen in the 12th dynasty, and it's very important for us to understand and get the idea that it's not just Kush, it's not just the 12th dynasty. The people in upper and lower Nubia, in the northern and southern part of Nubia, what we call Nubia, have been interacting for thousands of years with everybody up and down the Nile Valley. So this wasn't just a Kush thing and a 12th dynasty thing. People from Nubia, from lower Nubia, were interacting with people from ancient Kemet. And even before ancient Kemet became a country, there were people from Nubia interacting with them. So one of the things that happened in the Old Kingdom is that you had Nubian soldiers that were in Kemetic armies. We know that from a great deal of that. We also know that long before even ancient Kemet was a country, if you will, and the two lands were united, there was trade going up and down the Nile, up in the Nile Delta, all the way down to below Kush into the more the southern central part of Africa. There was trade going up and down that Nile Valley. And so what you begin to see in the 12th dynasty, though, the 12th dynasty is actually founded by a man named Amenemhat I, and he was somebody who was an official in the 11th dynasty's regal board, if you will, and cabinet, if you will. He was a part of the royal court in the 11th, an official there. And he ends up, after the 11th dynasty, that family kind of lost power. Amenemhat I becomes the first founder of Dynasty 12. He takes over and he becomes the first founder of Dynasty 12. And the country is still united. The north part and the south part of ancient Kemet, they're still united. And so as that's taking place, one of the things that happens that's very significant about Amenemhat I is Amenemhat I there's a very famous prophecy, and it's a piece of Egyptian literature, Kemetic literature, that talks about Amenemhat I. And it talks about him as if he was to come to be a bit of a savior, to come at a time where things were really despotic and there was a challenge in ancient Kemet. And he would come kind of as a savior, kind of as somebody who would come in and bring order and bring things back to life. And it says in that prophecy, in that literature about him during his time, that he was a son of a woman from Tasseti, that he was a son of a woman of Tasseti. And Tasseti, as you may know, is Nubia. So he's saying that the founder of the 12th dynasty is saying that his mother was Nubian, that he was the son of a woman of Tasseti. And so when you think about the 12th dynasty, you have to think about them being partly of Nubian origin. There being a close Nubian connection. There are Nubian connections through all of Kemet and Nubia. But when we think about the 12th dynasty in the Middle Kingdom, there are some specific and special Nubian connections that are there. One, in the 11th dynasty, just before the 12th dynasty, Mentuhotep II, the founder of the 11th dynasty, he has several Nubian wives. He has very famous Nubian wives like Kimset, Neshet, and we've talked about that before. He has Nubian wives. There's also belief that there are Nubian people in the army in the 11th dynasty as a part of their wars and the fighting in the army that they had. And you find also that there is this connection with Nubia, because at the time when the Middle Kingdom was founded, there was a disconnection between the southern part of ancient Kemet and the northern part of ancient Kemet. So you end up having a really close connection already continuing to develop with the southern part of Kemet and lower Nubia. And so that's there, and that's there in the 11th dynasty, as I mentioned, with Mentuhotep II having Nubian wives and Nubian people be there, obviously. And then also with the 12th dynasty, with the founder of the 12th dynasty, Amenemhat I, being a son of a woman from Taseti, who has a Nubian mother. So you look at the 12th dynasty, and these are some people from the 12th dynasty that you can see. This is Senwosret, right behind me, the third, and this is Amenemhat the third, right there, over to the right of me, over to the right. He is one of the members of the 12th dynasty. So these are two of the kings of the 12th dynasty, and so you must look at them and understand that they are partly of Nubian origin. So given the fact that Amenemhat I, who was the founder, and his successors in his family line were among Nubian royalty, had Nubian blood, they're among Nubian royalty. And so you begin to see this relationship develop in the Middle Kingdom with the 12th dynasty. The 12th dynasty not only starts to build upon the things that are already happening in the 11th dynasty. The 11th dynasty, they go back to doing some really significant building projects, like Mentuhotep II's temple, which is in where Thebes is now, right beside the temple of Hatshepsut that would be later built. But the 12th dynasty continues their building projects, and it's in the Middle Kingdom that the temple at Karnak begins to be officially built upon. There's already areas that are all kinds of holy areas, all kinds of distinct areas in the Middle Kingdom and in the 12th dynasty. But the temple of Karnak in the Middle Kingdom begins to be officially kind of built upon and built up. And you have local deities like Muntu, and which is why Mentuhotep II's name is named after him. That's a local deity. Amen becomes a local deity that begins to take national precedence, and it takes national precedence as a part of the people that are coming from Thebes, because the people in the 11th dynasty were from Thebes, from the southern part of Kemet, and the 12th dynasty was also from that area, but they eventually moved their capital a little bit farther north. But they take with them their traditions. They take with them their family traditions. So they're moving farther north, and they're taking their traditions with them. And they move a little bit farther north in ancient Kemet. But the idea of Amen eventually would become a significant deity who at one point in time was kind of localized in the Theban area, in the Waset area in southern Kemet. It becomes more of a significant deity as the 11th and 12th dynasties grow. And then eventually when you get to the New Kingdom, Amen it takes a significant role in the deity and the religion of ancient Kemet that spread all throughout, which we can talk about at a later time, because you have differences in deities. Like in the north, you might have Ptah in Memphis, and you might have Ra in Anu in Heliopolis, and Amen in Waset, and they seem to be able to recognize the commonality and not to hate each other because one city had an idea of God or referred to an aspect of God in this way, and another city referred to an aspect of God that way. They didn't seem to hate each other. They seemed to be able to get along. And so one of the things you still continue to have is that in the 12th dynasty, you still continue to have them, developing their building techniques, developing their architecture with the Temple of Karnak, continuing to have their additional capital being moved further up north. But then they also start to have more interactions with ancient Kush. And as they have more interactions with ancient Kush, you start to see them build these really magnificent forts. They start to really begin to say, okay, we are getting our hold of the country. We are taking over the country. We are in charge of things. But we still have this foe or this challenge that's down there in what is today the Sudan. And so you start to see building projects take place under the founding kings of the 12th dynasty, in particular among Senwosret III, which right behind me. He built quite a bit of forts in ancient Kush. And the idea is that they are starting to try to help take over some of this trade that's taking on and some of the interactions they're taking on with Kush and the people in Lower Nubia. So you find ancient Kemet taking itself and broadening its horizons, if you will, and going farther south than what it would typically go, even going up to the border of what is today modern day Sudan. So Lower Nubia in the ancient times was a part of what is today Egypt, but it was not a part of, so we had Lower Nubia, that was a part of what is today modern Egypt. But at the time, all of ancient Kemet did not take over. It did not encompass all of modern day Egypt. Part of ancient Kemet was not a part of modern day Egypt, and that Lower Nubia was right there, which is part of now modern day Egypt. So you find the Kemetic people pushing their borders, pushing their influence physically farther down the Nile, farther south. And you begin to see them develop these really magnificent forts. They begin to really think through forts that they're dealing with and things of that nature. And I'll put this up. This is not an actual fort. This is not one of the forts. So this is just like a generated thing, so you can just get an idea. This is a generated thing. But as you start to think about it, you start to see that the significance of what they're doing, the types of forts that they built were magnificent forts. They begin to build these huge structures, these complicated structures up and down the Nile, in particular as you get to the second cataract of Nile, and that's right in the very northern part of what is today the Sudan. And they begin to put markers there. They put these stone stelae, and they send markers, and they send messages to the Kushite people, and they basically say, you know, this is our land. We are claiming hold of everything that was from the south of our border, which is basically the first cataract of Nile, all the way down to the second cataract of Nile. We're claiming this, and we're basically gonna take over. This is gonna be our area. We're gonna control the trade here. You're not allowed to come farther north, because obviously there were people, many people in Africa and further south of ancient Kemet, traveling up the Nile, doing the regular trade that was typically done, which is why ancient Kush was so powerful, by the way, and so important. It's because it controlled so many trade routes. There were so many people who were looking to be a part of this highway that was the Nile, coming through that area of what is today the Sudan, that you had people vying for the control of that. Kemet was one of them. Ancient Kemet was one of them, and people who were Kushites were one of them. And there were people before the land we call Kush there as well, who were all controlling that trade, because that trade has been going on for many thousands of years. Long before we can probably even remember, trade has been going up and down now. People have been going up and down now. So the ancient Kemetic people began to, they start to sort their force, if you will, more forcefully in the Middle Kingdom. So even though there is some old kingdom, excavations and expeditions that go into Lower Nubia and sometimes into Upper Nubia, many times they're going with respect to trade. And there may be some fighting that takes place, but this type of the forts that are being built during the 12th dynasty in particular are of a new kind. They are of a different order, if you will. They are much more significant. As I mentioned, this is a generation. This is not one of the forts, but they are much more significant, much more elaborate. They include temples. They include combination forts. So you might have a fort on one side of the aisle, one side of the Nile, and another fort on the other. So one on the east and one on the west of the Nile. You have forts kind of working together. And you even had forts that were like triangular, and that there were three forts in terms of having a triple threat, if you will. And they basically told Kushite people, not to go beyond a certain point where there's forts were around the second cataract, and that they were in control of it. And that, they wanted to go and they wanted to trade. They could get out of your boats, and you can go on land to a certain area, a certain trading post. They had trading posts, a certain trading post that was in what is today like modern day Sudan, southern Egypt. You can go to that trading post and trade and conduct your business. But if you're going to handle business, you're going to do it that way. And we're going to control the waterways, if you will. And so it is in the 12th dynasty. It is in this period of time during the Middle Kingdom that we first hear the word Kush. We first see the word Kush being used. And so for that reason, you start to see that word Kush is there. And it's part of the fortress that's at Buhen. So Buhen is Buhen. There's a famous fort that's built there during the 12th dynasty, and it's built upon by many people. It's even used in a new kingdom many years later. But it is in that fort that they talk about conquering, about Muntu, one of their local deities, conquering the Nubian people. And apparently there had been what seems to be a coalition of people from ancient Nubia, from ancient Kush, who had gotten together to challenge Kemet. And they had gotten together to kind of push against what Kemet was doing in terms of building forts farther and farther south, because that was obviously infringing upon their land and upon their territory. And it appears that the Kemetic people were able to at least control that general area. Not all the way down to the third cataract, not Kerma, not places farther than that, but at least that general area around the second cataract. And above that, they were able to control. And it appears there was like 9 districts or 9 groups of people, clusters of people, societies, organizations that had banded together to try to perhaps go against the Kemetic people. And I guess they were not successful. And they list off the names of who these people were who were going up against them. And the very first name that they mention is Kush. They mentioned Kush as being either Kush was the leader of it, or Kush was the biggest of the districts, or Kush was just the one they put first. But that's the first time we've seen in Kemetic documents the name and the word Kush. And it's mentioned by 12th dynasty kings with respect to a fortress that's there right along the border of Sudan and Egypt, modern day Sudan and Egypt, at the fortress of Buhen. And so you begin to have a significant number of forts and a significant number of force taking place in ancient Kemet during this time, and they're asserting their authority. And when you read the text, it's clear to you that it's not just like it's a hate thing. It's not a racial thing. Like we tend to make things be in the way we look at things today, and that maybe they hated each other, or this was a racial thing. They could have been of the same culture. They could have been of the same ethnicity and still had differences because of economic, societal, and all types of things going on. And remember, people of the 12th dynasty were partly Nubian. The founder of the 12th dynasty, his mother was Nubian. He said his mother was from Tasseti. And so you're talking about people who had Nubian blood in them, and you're talking about a whole lot of interaction that took place all throughout Egypt with different types of people. So it isn't always like a racial or an ethnic thing that we want to make it. It appears to be there was real disdain, there was real hate, there was real fighting that took place. And it appears when you read about this, it seems as if a lot of this is economic. A lot of this has to do with pride. A lot of this has to do with societal power. When you read ancient Egypt and ancient Kemetic, it doesn't matter who they're fighting. They could be fighting somebody and what is today the border of modern day Turkey. They could be fighting somebody in today, what is today, Palestine or Israel, or in other places in the Middle East. They could be fighting people who were in Libya and Libyans. They could be fighting a number of different people, no matter where they were in the Middle East, various places, Syrian people. They called them all wretches. They called them all vile. They never went into these places saying, I'm going to, kind of soft and humble, kind of like, I'm not so sure if I'm going to win. It's kind of like hip hop. They didn't go in like saying, I'm not sure if I'm going to win this battle. Everybody was wretched. Everybody was going to be under their feet. Everybody was going to be delivered into their hands by God. And so you find many, many examples of Kemetic people, documenting controlling people or winning battles, and they have them bound, or they're talking about, God has delivered them to my hands. And there's even one pretty well-known battle scene and documentation of that from Mentuhotep II, who was the founder of the 11th dynasty, the founder of the Middle Kingdom, where he talks about taking not only Nubians and Western Asiatic people and Syrian people and Libyans, he also talks about taking other Egyptians, because he had to go from the southern part of ancient Kemet, where Thebes is and where Waset was, and take over the northern part. He had to go fight other people in Kemet in order to take and to unite the two lands. And he puts the Egyptian people, the Kemetic people, on the same row, on the same perspective, if you will, of the other people that he defeated. He makes no distinction. He's like, all of these people are under my control. God has delivered all of them into my hands. I've crushed all of these people who were my foes. And so a lot of times, we can't just sit back and make some of that relationship and that connection between ancient Kemet and Nubia be one-sided or kind of biased, if you will. To look at it for what it was. When they went to fight people, everybody, whoever they fought, wherever they documented, they talk about we killed them. They were wretched. They talk about they were under our feet. God delivered them into our hands. They were scared of me. They were trembling. All the people from all the realms come and they deliver things to me in order to give to God. They speak of themselves in this way. They had a very high ideal and respect and understanding of themselves. And I think that that's one of the things that we could take from. I think that's one of the things they contribute to history, if you will. The ability to say that they mean something, that I can see God in me, that you can see God in yourself, that you don't have to go into a challenge and necessarily think that you have to kowtow, that you can really commit yourself to God, because everything they did for religion. I mean, for the most part, what they built for religious reasons and for eternity. You can see God in yourself. You can face a challenge and understand that the deity that you're worshiping is inside of you and can manifest itself inside of you. So I think that's a powerful message from ancient Kemet. I just wanted to share that as we talk about the Middle Kingdom and the 12th dynasty. And as I mentioned, this was something that lasted from 1981 BC to 1802. And I want to remember some of the kings, Senwosret III here and Amenemhat III here from the 12th dynasty of ancient Kemet. So let me know if you have any questions. God bless you. I hope you have a good day. And I just wanted to share this with you.